So let's do part two of some of the things that people do when they want to hide properties, right? Not the normal popular ones where people often move their properties to kids to make it easier when they pass away, or alternatively move them into entities such as a trust or a company. But there is this weird thing that people are doing nowadays, and that is they move their assets from themselves to their parents or to their mothers, or alternatively to a sibling, which normally is the sister. Is this a great idea? Is this a good idea to protect their assets? What are some of the things that people need to think about, right? And what are the implications of making such a decision? Often people who take this decision think that they are actually saving themselves by doing this, but often they're not aware that there are certain implications that could count against them. Let's talk about this so that people are aware of some of the implications of making such a decision. All right, so to the folks that are new here, welcome. We welcome you to this channel. We're hoping you're going to come back again because we have these interesting discussions that are helpful to all of us. And for those that are returning, welcome back. Let's get to part two. So before we start, my name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. I'm an attorney and a director at a law firm called Mnyengeza Attorneys, situated in Johannesburg, South Africa. So what was I saying? What is the other way that people love to utilize to move properties away from them with the intention of saving or safeguarding these properties? And most of the time, you'll find that this decision is not necessarily made with the intention of making these properties generational. No. This decision is often made just to hide these properties so that an event such as divorce, when it occurs, the person actually has nothing on their name. I'm sure you would have seen there are popular people internationally who have tried to do this and who have successfully done this, right? Where now it's time to divorce with their partner and they've got nothing on their name. Now, how do people normally do this? Obviously, they will move the properties to their parents' name or to a sibling, right? Or buy every property not in their name, but in the name of either their sibling or their mother. Intention being that they want nothing on their name, they don't want to lose anything, right? If divorce comes, they have nothing on their name. So one of the things that I say, look out for when you're going to make this decision, because a lot of people get excited when the implications are good, especially when divorce comes and then the other spouse doesn't get anything. People often say, well done, right? You were able to save your properties and keep them in your family. But what is the downside, and what are the things that you need to think about when you're making this move? First things first, as we said in the other video, the first thing that you need to understand is that this decision is a permanent decision. If you decide to move or buy a property into the name of another individual, you have no ownership of that property. You have no control of that property. That person whose name is reflected on the title deed of those properties or that property is the one who's going to have utmost control. So what does this mean in essence? This means that as someone who's taking this decision, you are saying that you trust the other person will always protect your interests and will always put your interest above anything else because they know what you're doing. And you are guaranteeing that, okay, you're betting rather on the fact that they will never turn against you, never, have any issues. That property will always benefit you irrespective. So that's what you're saying. So is that something that you're guaranteed of? Do you trust that person to that extent that they will not change their minds or do things differently than what you envisioned? Because again, the property is in their name. And another thing that I want you to think about is the fact that if that person happens to have creditors and the creditors come to collect, you will have to be in a situation where you're going to help that person as soon as possible. Because why? Because if you do not, the creditors will get access to the properties that you purchased on their name with the intent of hiding those properties. So you have to know that their credit jeopardizes those properties. And because those properties are on their name, possibility of them being sold or attached very high, right? So which means that you'll find yourself in a situation where you're like, Esh, this person who I've transferred the property to has a situation. I need to try and rescue them. Are you going to be able to do that for the rest of your life? Are you going to be able to continue trying to minimize any issues that person could have in the form of credit just because you're trying to safeguard those properties? Because they are also individuals, right? They have a life to live. And so if the decisions they make, don't turn out well, unfortunately, their properties will also be affected. Are you going to be there all the way to make sure that you safeguard those properties from actually being taken away? So that's another thing that you need to think about, because that property is not in your name, so many things can happen. And the other thing, which is most important and vital here, is if that person passes away and those properties were on their name, the implications of all of this now. Remember, they are human beings, so they have their own properties. You might have had an arrangement with them informally because you wanted to hide properties and they were a willing participant to help you do that. But now, when they have passed away, do you really have a safeguard when it comes to those properties? Because you have to understand that if, for example, they do pass away and they have other people who are going to inherit from them, they will have to also get part of those properties. You're not the only one who's going to get those properties. Make an example here. Let's say you had moved these properties to your mother. Your mother just dies abruptly, right? Who's going to inherit? It's not only you because you decided to buy those properties and place them in her name. No, we have to look at the people that are meant to benefit. And when it comes to this, I'm looking at it from the perspective of interstate succession, right? With the understanding that your mother did not have a will. So in essence, you're going to have to follow your mother to try and make sure that they write up a will so that you are the sole beneficiary. Do you think that's going to be a successful thing that you can do easily so? Are your siblings not going to try and fight that? Or do you already have that arrangement with your mother? Because if something were to happen to her, it means everybody gets to inherit here. All right? And then the second thing when it comes to this is the fact that even if she has drafted a will, if she dies and she still has debts on her name, it means that the creditors take priority here. If there's no money in the estate, it's going to be up to you to try and raise the money to patch up all of these problems or these creditors, because you want to do what? You want to safeguard the properties that are in your mother's name because you still want those properties. Because otherwise, if you cannot do this, it means that those properties are in jeopardy and could be easily sold. Are you with me? Are you following me? These are some of the consequences and the implications of making this type of decision. So as much as you can see that it works for other people in certain instances and it could work to a certain extent, you also need to be mindful of the consequences of this decision. It's not a decision that you need to take lightly. You have to evaluate circumstances. Why are you making this decision? Is it necessary for you to move it to another person? Mind you, if, for example, your situation changes, and now you decide, okay, I want to dispose of that property for whatever reason. As we know, life happens, things change, and finances go either way. Let's say now you have a situation and you want to sell that property. Do you think you're going to easily be able to sell that property without your mother or your sister's consent? Unfortunately not. You're going to need them to also say yes. In fact, they have to be the ones to make this happen. If they say no, as we've seen in certain situations, if they say no, you lie, we're not selling anything here, you sort yourself out, it means game over. You can already see that you have no power here, and the law is not going to be on your side. So, do you see the implications of such a decision? Do you see what could be the consequences? Yes, I know you're probably thinking in your mind when you see it from others that, you know what, this could guarantee me protection of my assets. If, for example, I go through a divorce or something happens, I will know that my property will remain intact because it would be registered under my mother's name. But have you seen the other conditions, or rather the consequences that are attached to such a decision? So it's very important that when you're going to make this decision at the end, you really assess it and get the relevant advice before you make this type of decision, especially if you're going to move it to an individual who you're going to rely on to actually grant you the necessary ability to utilize that property, access to that property. So what are the things I say? Think about before you make this decision. One, why in the first place do I want to hide these assets? Is it because I want them to stay in my family so that it continues to benefit generations even after me? Because I have seen what happens when people lose properties. Alternatively, is it just because you know you live a risky life in the form of business and you don't want anything happening that could jeopardize those properties, because they are in your personal capacity, and so you'd rather they are out of your name? Or alternatively, are you doing this because you don't know what the future holds and you have certain fears? Maybe you could be divorced, and so you don't want to lose this type of property. As we all know, immovable property is not something easy to acquire. So first things first, establish why you're doing this. And number two, after you've established this, okay, what are the consequences of the decision that I'm going to make? If I'm going to move it to my kids, what do I need to know about this move? Number two, rather, if I'm going to move it to my parents or a sibling, what are the consequences there as well? And also, if I'm going to move it to an entity, what type of entity should I move it to? This is also going to be informed by your intention, by your prospective reason why you move this property or you want to move this property out of your own name. And then at the end, you just want to know financial implications and also other implications that stem from this decision that we talked about. For example, if you were to lose your mother, your son, or your sister, what could happen? So what are the things that you're going to need to do in order to ensure that you always continue to have benefit there? So there's a lot of things that you're going to have to assess and to look into when you're going to make this decision in order for you to ensure that you make the right decision. And like I always say, it might look good on the other end when you see it from a different family. It might not work for your family. So just be mindful of that and make sure that you assess the situation very carefully before you make a decision on how you're going to move properties or a property out of your name to any other person or an entity. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our discussion today, guys. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that it will be a point of reference when you're going to make a decision. Also, if you think it could be useful to any other individual who probably is thinking about this, you maybe want to pass this video on to them, because why can't we get educated in the masses? Guys, thank you so much for being here. For those that are here for the first time, make sure you come back, because we always have content that is helpful for all of us. I'll see you guys next time.